everyone. I hope you're all doing great out there. Keely and I are back ready to do our Overlocker project. So I hope you've been onto the website and downloaded the notes. So if you haven't, if you're watching this later on and you'd like to do it, it's sointoverlocking.com. If you go into my shop, and the lockdown Overlocker project notes are there, so you can download those and print them off. They're free for you to access through the shop. So this is the project. So I've done a couple of versions. I think everyone's going to be getting notebooks with covers for Christmas. I've gone just a little bit crazy with it. And that was the one that I showed in the video yesterday. And then this was the other one that I've whipped up as well. So any colorway, you can have a bit of fun. As I said, it's not big amounts of fabric that are required. The notebooks are ones I've got from my Coles, local Coles supermarket. They're $7, so they're an A5, just a hardcover notebook if you're looking for that. You can, of course, resize this pattern to fit any size notebook that you would like, or workbook. So if anyone's done the Fabulous Flatlock course with me, it's just a little bit of a tweak of our notebook cover that we do there as a project. So how are we going? Have we got some numbers on, Keels?
Like 67 to 58 people.
Okay, all right, so there's a few on, so we might get started. The first thing I would really love you to do is to remove the right hand needle from your overlocker. So we're going to work with a wide flatlock, so we're only going to use the left hand needle. I'm going to be working very slowly, but if anything happens that you fall behind, it'll be posted to my page so you can watch it back later. And I will film another version and pop it on my YouTube as well, so you can watch it at any time that you might like to do this project. So always when you remove the needles from your machine, we actually have to take it out. A lot of people come to my classes and they think if they just don't thread the needle, then that's suitable, but you actually have to physically remove it. So whenever you remove a needle from an overlocker, we just pop the screwdriver in. I've already done mine, but we're just going to do a couple of turns to the left to loosen the screw. Then you can drop the needle out. Really important that you remember to tighten the screw when you're finished, particularly if you have these tiny little screws in your machine. They will work their way out while you're sewing, and they're almost impossible to find. So ideally, always tighten up the screw when you've finished. So I'm going to start on this Bernina, which is a tension machine. And then I'm also going to thread a baby lock no tension. If you're doing this project on a baby lock with no tensions, you will need to thread your needle differently. So you can thread your loopers, but wait for me to go across to that machine, and then I'll show you the difference with threading the needle on that. Now, with any machine that isn't an air thread, you must follow your threading sequence. So usually upper looper, lower looper, then your needles. So I'm doing my upper looper now, which is all the blue ones. Let me just click the thread in. I'm using my accent thread on the upper looper because that's going to be my feature thread for this particular one that I'm doing. Just need to find my tweezers. I had everything laid out and then I've thrown stuff on top of it. All right, so for my my decorative thread, or my feature thread for the flatlock, is going to be placed on that upper looper, which on this Bernina is the blue one. And I'm doing this really badly just because everyone's watching. There we go. And grab that from there. So upper looper, and of course you can tie your threads on and pull them through if you prefer. If you do that, I always suggest not sewing them through, but actually taking them through by hand, because you've got more chance of it actually being successful. So I'm just following all the little red dots to clip that into there and into here. And then through the eye of the looper. You can also get looper threader wires for the machines. I'm really clumsy with them, and I just find I work better with tweezers.
Someone else will be taking the cutter away.
No, so one of the questions already is, have I removed the cutter? No, I always work with my blade. So always leave my blade up. When we're flat locking, we're going to stitch on the fold, and we're going to work away from the blade. So now I'm threading just my left needle, and we're going up and around and into the needle. And of course, I've got my handy little needle threader that I love. Really should have given this machine a clean before today. Okay, so now my needle's threaded. So pop the threads under the foot and off to the side. So for a machine with tensions, when we're flat locking, we need to adjust our tensions. So previously I was doing a 4-thread overlock, so I had all my tensions balanced, but we're going to reduce the needle tension to the lowest possible. So 0, or on the Benina, 1 is the lowest it's going to go. Our upper looper, generally on 3 or 4, so depending on what machine you have. So I'm going to test sew this on 4. If I feel I need a little bit more thread, then I'm going to lower the tension to 3, and then the lower looper we're going to tighten right up. So 6 or 7, just check your manual for your particular machine to see what the recommended settings are when you're flat locking.
Someone said they have no sound here.
Okay, so has everyone got sound? Because Carol doesn't. Is it just Carol, or is it anyone else? Because we thought we fixed our sound issue from last week. Yeah. How are we going? Everyone's liking, so I think that means we've got sound. So Wendy's got sound. So it might just be you, Carol.
Yeah, I got sound.
Okay. All right, so when we're flat locking, we're going to work either with 2 pieces to join or on the fold. So I've just got my little scrap bit of fabric here to do my test sew. Stitch length, I'm going to start on 2.5, depending on the type of thread that you're working with. You may have to adjust that as well, and my differential feed is set on 1. So you might be able to see here, I've got my fold of my fabric sitting away from my blade. So a lot of your machines will have markings on them that give you a bit of a guide. So on this particular one, there's a little marking on the foot here, a little groove, which I call the death line. A lot of the brands will have a line on the needle plate. So that death line is, if you cross it, you're going to cut it with your blade. So you just want to keep a little bit to the left. As you're stitching the flat lock, it may look a little bit loopy over the edge of the stitch, but that's okay, because when we open the seam up to sit flat, that extra thread will get absorbed in the fold. So off we go. So that's my stitch, and you'll see with having the needle thread such a loose tension, see how that then pulls open to sit flat, and then I've got that ladder stitch happening on the back. So at the moment, I just want to tweak this stitch length, because for me that's a little bit too open. I like to have it a little bit more closed. So I'm
Someone asked, can you give me the numbers again?
okay, so somebody's asking for the tension settings again. So the left needle, we're going to drop to 0 or 1, depending what your lowest setting is on your machine. The right hand needle doesn't matter because we're not using it. The upper looper is on your standard setting, so a 3 or a 4, and your lower looper is on 6 or 7. So I've shortened my stitch length, and I'm just going to do another bit of a test run on this one.
Yeah, people are saying that they opted to watch now.
Okay. So you can play with the stitch length until you're happy with it. One of the other things that you can do with the flat lock, if you have the ability on your machine to increase your cutting width, is you can really ramp out the cutting width. When we do this, of course, this is where we may have to change our upper looper tension to get enough thread to cover that extra width that we're adding in. So I've just taken my width out to the full cutting width, which on this one it's a 9mm seam, so it's really quite wide. And you'll see that the stitch coming through there it's quite tight. So I'm going to loosen my upper looper, which is going to give me more thread. You should see this as it sewed through. So you can see here with my upper looper tension on 4, it's pulling in quite a bit. So once I've taken that to 3, see how much more open and flat that is. And that's the sort of flat lock I like. I really like a nice wide feature stitch. So that one's set up. I'm now going to just move across to the baby lock. So if you have a no tension baby lock machine, and usually with an air thread, some of these decorative threads will blow through beautifully. If you've got a thread that's being a bit difficult and doesn't want to play nice, you can use the wire that comes with your machine, which all the air thread machines would have a wire in their accessory kit that you can feed through, and it has a little loop. I just find it's much easier to cut a long piece of thread, pop the 2 ends down into the upper looper port, and we're going to blow that through, but you need to hang on to this end, otherwise the whole piece of thread will travel all the way through. Then I'm going to pick up that decorative thread in that loop and then just manually draw that through. Okay, so the difference between a machine with tensions and one of these with a thread delivery unit, this machine works on the amount of thread that's required to make the stitch, and changing the A, B, C, D selector will alter the stitch accordingly. So A is for 4-thread overlocking, B is for 3-thread narrow, C is for narrow hem, D is for rolled hemming and flat locking. So I'm taking my selector around to D. But the problem with having a machine, it's not a problem really, but we can't change the needle tension like I did on the Bonina. So because we're talking the amount of distance the thread travels, whenever you're flat locking on one of these machines, your needle thread needs to travel with the upper looper through this path. You'd normally thread through here or here if you're using the right needle. So we're going to pop the thread into this position. If you forget to do this step, your flat lock just won't open up. So yeah, really important step to remember. I'm going to grab my needle threader and thread this little baby up. And as always, trying to look really professional, and it doesn't want to work for me right at this very moment. There we go. All right, so I've got my needle threaded now. My stitch selector is on D. Again, I have my full cutting width, so I've got that out to 7.5, and my stitch length is on 2.5. With an air thread machine, you really don't have to worry about popping your threads under the foot. So if it's a standard manual threading machine, you always must have the threads under the foot. What I like to do though is cut them off so that they're not too long. So if you run them through the thread cutter on the side, that will be fine. Again, we're going to work on the fold. I've got the clear foot on here because that way it just might be a bit easier for you to see that visual. And off we go. All right, so we're going to open this up. So there's my flat lock on that side and my ladder stitch on that side. All right. So how are we going with threading? Is there anyone who's sewing along with me, or are most people going to actually do it later?
A lot of comments have said that they're watching now and they'll do it later.
Okay.
They're most of the comments that I've seen. I haven't seen anybody.
All right, so it seems like most people are sewing through later, so I will just keep motoring through. So I'll start on this one. I'm actually going to do 2 today, or work through 2.
Millie Shepherd's sewing along with you.
So, okay, so Mary's sewing along with me. Hi, Mary.
Amanda's sewing with you. Juliet is trying to go with you.
Okay, so on page 2 of our notes, we're going to start with the center front panel. So this is one of the pieces which is 12 inches by 9.5 inches. And I've already actually pressed a little fold in the center there. So I find it's a bit easier when you're doing this type of work if you actually have it pressed and it's nice and crisp to work with.
So I said 4:14 here in the UK. I don't think so yet.
So who's that sewing over in the UK? So hello over in the UK. It's 4:14. Thank you for joining us. So, and yes, you better not sew. I'll bet the rest of the household wouldn't appreciate that. So, all right. So I'm going to now stitch my fold on the right side of the fabric. So if you're working with a printed fabric, you're going to have your wrong sides folded together. And off we go. Sorry, what was the question about the stitch not going flat?
It just said my stitch didn't go flat on baby lock.
So somebody who's sewing on a baby lock said their stitch didn't go flat. Just make sure that you have threaded with your needle thread through the upper looper, and make sure that your stitch selector's on D. That's the other thing that you need to check if you're working on one of these machines. So that's my first row of stitching done on this one. And I'm going to jump over and do a row of stitching on that one as well. I sort of figure if I'm doing 2, you get to see both types of machines in action. And also it keeps me at a slower pace for anyone who's trying to sew along with me. So again, I'm working on the fold and I've got my wrong sides together. And off we go. And then we're going to open her up to sit beautifully flat. Just like that. Okay, so now the center fold's done. There's a bit of moving around today, and I actually had to really clean up my sewing room and move all of the stuff that's around. So it was probably a really good exercise to do this today. And I'm going to move over to the cutting table.
Do you cut any material off or not?
No, there's no trimming the fabric when we're flat locking. So somebody's asked, am I cutting the fabric as I go? When we're away from the blade, so the fold of the fabric is sitting a little bit away from the blade. So now we're going to just move over to the cutting table. Sorry, I'm really pushing the friendship with Keely today, making her get up and move around. So I have my center fold. I now want to mark 2.5 inches from both sides of that. So grabbing my ruler and...
Is your decorative thread on the upper looper and what size needle and type thread?
So the decorative thread is on the upper looper, that's correct. And I've got just a normal size 14 needle in my overlocker with the polyester thread. So my feature thread for the ladder stitch is what I have on the needle thread.
And my stitch is not sitting flat as I thought, even after pressing.
So if there's individual questions about the stitches, maybe send me a PM after the class, and then I can answer it and help you. If you send me some photos, I might be able to work through that a little bit better. So I'm always much better if I can actually see. So I'm just using my chalk marker I love these little clover markers. They've got the chalk in and the little wheel, so you get that lovely fine line that you're working with. I'm just going to have to warm up my iron because it's gone to sleep. And I'm just going to mark this one as well. I don't know if the white chalk's going to work. We might have to go across to pink. We'll see. Probably need a blue one too. Yeah, let's try the pink one. Isn't it funny how you get your favourite tools that just work the best for you? If you are watching me and I look awkward, I'm left-handed, so I am really awkward. It's not mirror imaged, it's just me. And it's not the camera person, Keely just said. We're hoping we don't have too many technical issues today. Okay, so now I'm just going to give this a little press. Again, wrong sides together to give me that nice sharp edge to flat lock.
Someone says I use a friction marker per pile, which disappears when you heat it.
Yeah, so somebody's made a comment about the friction markers, and they're great too.
Andy from the UK is a lefty as well.
I think there's a lot of left-handed sewers out there. I always say that I'm more creative because I'm left-handed. I'm probably a bit more messy. I don't know. All right, so again, I'm just folding this over. Okay, so we're going to do a second row of flat lock now on each of these folds. It's always a great idea to always start at that same side. So always starting from the top. Otherwise, your flat lock will look a little bit different. You'll see here I've got a dark grey thread on my needle, which is what I'm wanting for my ladder stitch. And I've got the lighter grey thread in my looper. So if I flipped and stitched that way, then the stitch is going to look a little bit different. Probably only if you're really aware of it. Somebody just looking at it isn't really going to know, but it's like when you make something, you get a little bit more particular about how it looks. So we'll jump on this one first and do another row of stitching. So you can see I'm using that marker, which is like what I call my death line, and I've got my fabric sitting over there. You could even go as far across as the right needle if you like. Sometimes it can make it a little bit too loopy, so just have a play with your stitch and work out what's going to work the best for you for getting it to sit flat and to have the stitch still looking nice.
Someone said love the
perfect. I've dressed up to the max for lockdown. Really, I've got real clothes on and makeup, and I've done my hair. And yes, I'm barefoot because I always sew barefoot. And I haven't even painted my toenails because, I'm not going anywhere so no one sees them. So try to miss my feet if you can, Keels.
I have to pay for feet pics. I have to pay for the feet pics.
So there's my 3 rows of stitching for the flat lock. I'm just going to jump on and do this one very quickly. And I think we went that way, didn't we? It's really good if I can read the stitch. No, it's this way. That's been one of the good things about doing these Saturday lives is I actually have to make an effort with myself. I'm finding with lockdown, it's really hard to get out of pajamas and actually do something with my hair. So. so I'll just open this up. I won't go down towards my feet. There's my 3 rows of flat locking done. I'm now going to go back to the iron and we're going to press a fold in the center here and here, but this time we're going to go right sides together.
How do you know which end you have sewn from without knowing?
Once somebody's asked, how do you know which end you've sewn from? Once you start to read the stitch well, it'll make a little bit more sense once you've flat locked a few times. As I said, this one was quite easy because I had my needle thread in the darker grey and my looper thread in the lighter grey. So my needle thread's always going to be to the left. So that's a really good way of working it out. So, all right, so we're going to go right sides together. With a lot of these decorative threads, you want to make sure your iron's not too hot because they don't like a hot iron, and particularly if you're using a woolly nylon, they will melt under the heat. So even having a pressing cloth would be handy. So we're going to line these up like this and this.
I've sewn 2 right sides together.
So somebody's sewn right sides together. So if you sew the wrong side and you realise, the great thing about flat locking is it's such an easy stitch to unpick. All you need to do is run your quick unpick or blade through the ladder stitch and it'll basically fall apart. It makes a really big mess on the floor, but it's a great easy unpick. All right, so again, we're going to fold this one this way. Actually, I might give this a bit of a press open just to get those ladder stitches sitting better. And being left-handed, I've got my cord coming from the wrong direction. So, because the PowerPoint's over the other side there. So we're going to go right sides together. Give that a little press. And the same on that side. So matching up just to get it evenly spaced, really. Okay, so again, back over to the machines. This time I'm going to stitch on this side and then my ladder stitch is going to be my feature in the center of these stitches. Don't get my foot. So with the ladder stitch too, because I've got my stitch length closer for the flat lock here, I actually want my ladder stitch to be a little bit further apart. So I'm going to increase my stitch length. So I'm going to take that up to sort of the 2.5 to 3, let's go to 3. Because I like the ladder stitch spaced a little bit better. And when you're stitching this, we can actually move even further away. So I'm using sort of the cutout of the foot here. It's going to look really, really loopy, but it's okay because when we open it up, it's just going to give me less fabric in the fold. All right, so there's my ladder stitch. Look at that. I really have to stop going towards my feet. Stop using my lap, use the bench. Yeah. All right, so if I'm going to open this one up, pop this one aside and I'm going over to my navy one now. Again, I'm going to increase my stitch length and run this through. Probably doesn't matter which direction you're sewing this time, and I'm going to use my right needle marking on the foot there as my guide for my fabric. You know, whenever you're sewing, you should never watch your needle because as soon as you watch your needle, you're going to sew crooked. So always watch from the front of the foot. Give yourself a marking that you're following here and don't look at what's happening back there while you're stitching. And we're going to open it up. Look, and there's a gorgeous ladder stitch. I think this is probably going to look quite stunning. I've got a piece of linen that's cream with a navy design, so The only reason I'm lifting the foot at this point is to help me with my lining up. Otherwise, I would always start, if I'm just overlocking, I always just start at the front of the foot to stitch. But remember, when you do raise your foot to stitch, always remember to put the foot back down again. That's a really important part. Okay, so this is my right side with my 3 rows of flat locking and 2 rows of ladder stitch. We're now going to go and measure another row to put another row of flat locking, ladder stitch on each side of this. Thank you, camera person. So because I want to do my fold with the right sides together, because it is going to be the ladder stitch that's the feature, this time I'm actually going to mark my line on the reverse side. So I'm going to flip this over. And all the other ones I've made, I've done a quick measure, and it's about 1 1/8 of an inch distance. So to try and keep the gap the same, I'm actually going to have that same distance. So I've got my 1 1/8 line there running through the middle of my stitch. I'll take my white chalk and mark that one, and then we're going to flip over and do the same on the other side. And my dogs have decided to bark, so I hope that's not coming through. All right, so that's got my marking on there. And the same with this one. I'm going to do a row. So again, I'm just going to measure it. And it's about that. This one's probably more about an inch actually. So I'm just going to do an inch from that last row of stitching. Centering that in the fold. I have my pink chalk for this one. And this one. Doesn't really matter, and you can do as many rows of decorative stitching as you like in these. You can go really, really crazy with it. So again, we're going to go right sides together and just give that a bit of a press.
Someone asked what chalk roller are you using?
So the chalk roller that I'm using it's a Clover product. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it has this great padded chalk, and you can refill it. But it has a little roller in the top. It's Clover. That's just the brand. Okay.
Should the ladder stitch sit totally flat?
Depending on your machine, whether the ladder stitch will sit totally flat. It's every machine's slightly different, I find. And so in my classes, when we do our notebook project, it's amazing how the different models, the flat locking is all a little bit different. So ideally, it all comes down to how much fabric you're catching when you're stitching. Yeah, we'll go this one first this time. Sorry, keep you on your toes. And do another row of stitching here. And I'll flip it around and do this fold as well. Okay, so that's that panel completed. I really love the navy and cream together. Looks gorgeous. And I'm just rolling over to this one, and we're going to do this row of stitching too. So again, lifting the foot just to make it easier for lining up. So when you catch less fabric in your flat lock, you are going to have the ladder stitch side sitting much flatter. So I'm going to stitch through here. And again, we're going to open it up. So back up to give it an iron, and now we're going to trim these pieces down to the size that I need them to be for the construction. So maybe just pop a cloth over when you're working with these types of fabrics. A Raja cloth would be ideal. I just can't find mine at the moment. But just to stop the heat affecting your decorative threads. Okay, pop that one over here, and we'll give this one an iron too. Okay. So now we're going to trim these down to size. So the 9.5 inches which we've cut this way is perfect, but we want them to be 9 inches this way. So I like to use my cutting mat and line up my center flat lock on the 4.5 inch mark of the cutting board.
Someone asked, should I disengage the knife when flat locking, as I can rotate mine out of the way, top knife?
So again, somebody's asked about disengaging the knife when flat locking. With all machines, you can disengage your knife. I actually prefer not to. You're not actually going to get close to the knife. So I would prefer that you kept the knife. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. The family's got home and there's noise and phones going off in the kitchen. But I would prefer that you would actually keep your knife engaged and just learn to move your fabric away. It just causes less issues if you have too much fabric when you're stitching. If you forget to re-engage your knife, it can just cause you so many issues. I always just recommend using the knife when you all the time, pretty much. So
someone said, what size do I trim it to?
So it's going to be trimmed to 9 inches. So lining up that center row of flat locking on the 4.5 mark of the cutting board, and then we can do a straight cut at the end there, and then again at the 9 inch mark. Okay, I'll pop that one aside. I'm leaving all my chains hanging out because I like to actually cut those off when I'm doing the side seams. If you cut these too short, being a 3-thread stitch, it can actually unravel. So I always leave the overlocker chain there. I know it looks really messy, and some people are really tidy sewers. I'm probably not a tidy sewer, so it doesn't worry me having the threads hanging out over the edge. Okay, so again, sew this one down to the 9 inches. So if you're going to do if you're designing one of these for a different size book and you're going to do lots of stitching, just always give yourself plenty of width in this panel, because the flat locking and ladder stitch will draw the size of the fabric in. So, okay, now we're going to move back over to the machines. Let's go to this one first. It's easier for you, isn't it? Okay, so we're now going to, I should just check that I've done everything right. Yes. So we're now going to remove these threads from the machine. If you're tying on, leave enough that you can draw it through. But we're going to go now to a 3-thread wide overlock. Oh, no, I've done wrong. Here we go. I've got to put the side pieces on. Here we go. I was jumping the gun. I should have read the notes. So I'm going to quickly rethread this baby. This will just give everyone a chance to catch up. That's why I did it. Believe me. So we need to put our side panels on first. And we're still going to use our flat lock for this purpose. So I'm going to pop that through to there. So the only adjustment I'm going to make at this point is I've got 6mm seam allowances. So where I had my cutting width increased for the flat lock, I'm now going to adjust my cutting width into 6mm, because for the construction side of the project, that's what I have it set up for. So we're going to go up, over and down. And I'm going to thread up that needle. And for some reason it's wanting to pull back through today. Okay, make these a little bit shorter, cut this one off there, unlock, ready to sew. So I've brought my cutting width in, and remember I'd had my stitch length longer for the ladder stitch. Now we're going back to flat locking. I'm going to shorten the stitch length back. Our side pieces for the front panel are 2.5 inches wide. So I'm going to take one of those and place it on the wrong side of the fabric, like this. You may need to, if you've played with your stitch length, you might actually want to just have a play with your a sample and make sure that you're happy with the length before you join these pieces. So wrong sides together, we're stitching on the right side of the fabric, and this is going to join our flat lock together. And just trim it out later. And the same on the other side. So again, we're going to take this, and remember we're always wanting to start from that same end. So that's the front of my notebook cover all together. So I'll pop this one aside and we'll move back over to the Benina. So again, I'd adjusted my cutting width with this one. So I'm going to bring that back into that 6mm mark, which is that standard sort of dot marking. And I'm going to bring my tension back to 4, because I think from memory, that was the better setting, but I am just going to do a quick test run and make sure that we're still on the same stitch length. Let's bring that back as well. Okay, so I've tweaked that a little bit. I've played with my stitch length as well as my tension, and I'm happy with that. So my 2.5 inch piece, I'm going to place on the wrong side of the piece that I'm joining, and we're going to stitch that long seam. And we'll open that one up. This one's quite busy compared to some of the others that I've done, but I love the colours. I think they're really pretty. And this accent thread just matched beautifully. So again, wrong sides together, we're stitching on the right side of the fabric. And we open that up to sit beautifully flat. So now I'm going to give these a press and fuse them to the pellin. At the same time, I'm going to fuse the pellin to 2 of the inside flat pieces. So let's head back over to the iron. I'll pick my notes up that I've dropped and grab these. Okay, so I've got a fusible wadding, which is a Bosal product. It's fairly light, it's nice and stable, and it's got the fusible product. I said on the video that I posted yesterday that any sort of lightweight product to help stabilize would be ideal. So if you don't have, because we are in lockdown, if you don't have pieces of Pellin that you can use, or Parlin or fleece, you can use an interfacing. So a medium weight sort of dress interfacing would work really well. So I'm just going to give this a bit of an iron so it's sitting nice and flat for me. My iron's still warming up. So when you're working with these fusible products, we don't want steam. So they tend to not like steam, and we don't want the iron too hot either. So a lot of the times they will bubble and sort of wrinkle if the iron's too hot. So let's hope, look at that, perfect size. That's exactly what you want. You want it to be the size of the Pellin. It's always that moment of doubt, isn't there, when you're working with something. So when you're doing this, it's not so much an iron, but a press. So it's holding the iron down and pressing it so it gets the opportunity to fuse. If you're just ironing over and over, you're really not holding the heat long enough in one spot. Has anyone commented or questioned or? Okay. I'll just move that up to cover it.
There's comments where someone asks, like, what size do I trim it to? And someone else answered saying everything's on your website, it's easy to find, kind of thing.
All right, so that one's done, ready to go. And I'm also going to fuse these pieces. You could have this done, before you start if you wanted to save you a bit of time at this step. No, I don't really have to cover it. Kelly just asked, am I going to put the thing over it? I don't really need to, because I don't have the decorative threads as much. And I probably should here because I've got a little bit of the fusible poking out. So, I was doing the right thing. Okay. So I'll pop those ones aside and let's give this one a press. Let's hope this one has actually come out to the right size too. I'll be pretty happy if that's happened. So I'm sewing out in what was my rumpus room, and I've taken over that because I needed more space. And it's always really challenging because there's no doors on here. So if you can hear lots of noise, it's just my husband in the kitchen who's just decided to make lots of noise. So apologies about that. All right, so we're just going to hold this down to fuse it. So it's sort of, if you have an iron, this one doesn't have a heat setting as such, which is really good for me because I'm great at burning stuff. So I always like to ramp up the iron a bit too hot. This has actually prevented me doing that. So it saved probably a lot of my fabrics. But yeah, I think it's a permanent press setting, or don't go as high as your cotton setting because you're just going to make your fusible product. Someone said not to apologise about having a man in the kitchen. Kelly just said he's not doing anything useful though. All right, we'll pop that one aside, and we've got these two little pieces to do, and then we're going to put it all together. So these are a really quick project to make. You know, if you did want to do a few as gifts, because you know we've got extra time on our hands now, so may as well start doing some Christmas sewing. You could, yeah, easily do a nice little cover for a diary or a notebook or something like that. I'm still a pen and paper girl. I know a lot of people have gone to digital diaries and things, but for me, I really like to write things down. So, and I guess this project was just more about being able to work with stuff that we all have on hand and stuff that's easily accessible too. Okay, so I'm going to pop this one over here. Let's go to this one first. Actually, I might just do the rest of the construction just on one, because you probably don't need to see me put two together. It was more about the difference in the threading and the slightly different width of the foot of the machine. So we might just do the construction on one of them. So I'm going to cut all my threads off. I actually could have left my lower looper threaded had I thought about that. And we're now going to go to a 3-thread wide overlock with our polyester threads that we have for construction. So I'm going to a soft grey for putting all this together, because grey is a bit of a favourite of mine. It just goes with everything. And just while I'm doing this, talking about maintenance on your machine, I always talk in my classes about how important it is to change your needles regularly. And I was doing the other one with the sewing fabrics, the other pinky coloured one, the other day, and I was getting the odd skip stitch on this machine, and it was late. I was sewing, you know, at a silly time like I do, and I redid it a couple of times, and then when I looked, one of my needle thread actually wasn't fully secure in that guide at the top there, so it was a little bit to the side. So I clipped it in, did the next row of stitching beautifully, and then the next row skipped a stitch again. So I did that sensible thing of actually changing my needles, and surprise, surprise, didn't get another skip stitch. So even though I do change my needles regularly, they do get dull, they do get burrs. So, and I can actually show you on my baby lock, I'd been putting up with the blade not being great, and it was all right on a single or 2 layers of light fabric, but anything heavier, it tended to not really like to cut it. So I put a new blade in that one this morning, and it's cutting like a charm now. So always have a look at your machines and give them a bit of love.
Someone said, how often should you change your needles? And then someone else said, can you please tell us which step you're up to? Thank you, I'm guessing step 4.
So I am up to step 4. Yes, so step 4, which is on the last page of the notes. And what I've done is I've removed all the decorative thread, and I'm rethreading for a 3-thread wide overlock using polyester thread, stitch length of 2.5, cutting width of standard or 6mm. And I'm just going to thread that needle up. And you should change your needles every 6 to 8 hours of sewing. So overlockers, emphasis on the should, yes. But I do actually change my needles very regularly. No, don't break them. If you think about an overlocker does on average 1,500 stitches a minute. So they're going super fast through often lots of layers of fabric, and we often treat our overlockers as a bit of a workhorse. So changing the needles regularly will prevent them going dull, because they do go dull and then they're just going to punch holes in your fabric, and it's not great. So always have spare needles on hand. Okay, so tensions all back to balance. So I'm going to take all this back to 4, and I'm going to do a quick test. So stitch length on 2.5, differential on 1, and I can run that through. So the reason I decided to do a 3-thread overlock, one, it's because it's giving you an extra stitch that you have to do as for the project, because it's always good to learn. But I always find that you don't need a 4-thread overlock if you're just neatening fabric, which is what the next step we're going to do. So this is my lining fabric, and I'm just going to run a row of overlocking on both the short edges. So I could have used a 4-thread overlock, but realistically, better with a 3 because it's just less bulk. Okay, so somebody's asked about the needle type. So every overlock is different. So the Beninas use standard universal needles. The Baby Lock 8 threads use EL705s. Your Genomes will use HA by 1SP. Baby Lock 4 threads use HA by 1SP. Jukies use standard universals, so check your manual because they are all very different. Singers use the EL705s, most of them, but every machine's going to be different, so just check your manual. Okay, so that's my 3-thread overlock, just neatening the edge of that fabric. So I'm going to pop that one aside now, and I'm going to thread up for a 4-thread overlock. So this is halfway through step 4. It says insert another needle into the right hand position and thread. I'll pop that up through there. And when you're taking needles in and out of the machine, this machine has this great little hiding spot that you can put your spare needle into, so you know that that's the one that's going back into the machine. It's always best not to put them into the packet, because as soon as you put them into the packet, you don't know what's new and what's being used. If you don't have this set up, and if you've done my Learning to Love Your Overlocker class, you know I always go around and put a little bit of fabric on your machine. It can be just a bit of cotton fabric, it can be, you know, a bit of fleece, whatever works for you. But that's a great way of storing your needles, so you know which one you've used already, and you're not putting used needles into your packet. I know some people put them into their threads, but then you can split your threads, so just better off always keeping your needle somewhere safe. And yeah, you can put it on the bench next to you or into your tablecloth or whatever, but yeah, I just find that system works really well for me. I'm going to thread this up and pop this through. Okay, so pretty much my settings are going to be the same, but I'm just going to do a test just in case. Always best to do a test run just in case something's gone astray. So there's my beautiful 4-thread overlock, all perfect. And now we're going to do the side seams for these inside flaps. So the extra piece of fabric that's 3 inches wide, and we're going to place it right sides together, and we're going to stitch along just skimming. We don't want to cut a whole lot off, so we just want to trim a little bit as we go.
What thread do you use for construction thread?
Okay, so somebody's asked what thread to use for construction, so just a polyester overlocking thread would be perfect. Loop that around, and we'll grab another one and run that through. Such pretty fabric, this. I love this pink. Keely just whispered it's purple, but I think it's pink. And of course I should have put my thread catcher on to catch my bits as it's going through, but I think I said earlier I'm a bit of a messy sewer. So. All right, so we're going to jump up and we're going to press these, and I'm actually going to do a little technique as well with this. So Let's move back over here. I'll wake my iron up because it's probably gone to sleep on me. So just having a look at your project too, your ladder stitch can be a feature just as it is, looking at the threads as a contrast, but you can also thread ribbon through. I also teach in my flat locking class. I've got that one upside down. You can use yarn, you can use decorative threads with beads, which is one of the fun things I really love to do in that class. But I'm just going to do a really quick thread with some ribbon just to show you just another concept of how you can use your ladder stitch as a base to then hand embellish with. And yes, it's almost a swear word for me, that hand embellish word. So what I like to do with the ribbon is usually go over 4, under 2. It's really hard to see what I'm doing with the phone in my face, Kills.
Watch through the camera then. Sorry.
So we're going to go over 4, under 2, over 4, under 2. I did an heirloom case years and years ago doing this. And the other thing that you can do once you've got your ribbon running through is then to wrap another ribbon over the top. So you don't see those 2 ladder stitches at all. And that can be a great way of hand embellishing and using the overlocker as a base. So I'm going to bring through 2, so I'm going to pick up 2 and pick up 2. So I like to do the ribbon at this step before I do the side seams, because that way then it's all caught in the construction. If I'm doing anything with beads or decorative threads and yarns and things, I tend to do that afterwards. So, but the ribbon works well now because then we can make sure we catch it properly in our overlocked seam, and it's nice and secure. Can you tell I don't do hand stuff very often? I'm very awkward with it. I'm a machine girl through and through. I know hands sewing can be great therapy, but yeah, machine's so much faster. And just trying to make that flip over because it's decided to not sit flat for me. So I think this is about a 4mm wide ribbon, 3mm, so 3 or 4mm. 6 is going to be really wide if you want it to be a big sort of heavy feature. So I'm going to slide that back a little bit. So making sure I've got enough of a tail of the ribbon at that end. And we're going to chop this bit off. I think I'll leave the back as it is. So that's that done. I'm going to pop that aside. And now my iron should be awake. I'm now going to press this nice and flat. I can put a bit of steam on this now just to make that sit flat. And then we're going to fold that edge over so that it's sitting perfectly along that seam. Just roll it a little bit with my fingers to make it be nice. And we'll do the same for the other side. So we've just hit the hour mark, so we're probably a little bit over an hour. All right. So the next seam that we're going to stitch is placing these flat pieces, which may go around the inside of the book cover, on the right side of the front piece. If you want to use pins, I don't tend to use a lot of pins when I'm using an overlocker, but if you do, just make sure you're pinning sort of far enough away and you're pulling them out as you go. So you remove them as you go. The other great thing to use is the quilter's clips, like the Wonder clips. They work really well for holding layers of fabric together. So I just can't put my hand on mine right at the moment. I should have had them out ready to go. But I did a very quick clean up around here, so they're around somewhere. And I'll just give the lining a little bit of an iron while I'm standing here, and I won't have to come back. Okay, let's go. Don't get my feet. Don't get my feet. I got my nails done on my hands, but you know, didn't do the feet. So again, just trimming a small amount. I'll put my catcher back on so that it's not too messy. And no, you're right. So make sure you get rid of those pins because you don't want to hit it with your blade. And we're just going to sew this seam straight through. And so it's one of the, sorry, somebody asked what the ironing board wadding's made of. It's actually an ironing mat. So it's a pure wool ironing mat. And it's really handy to have, I'm just going to tweak that thread back in. It's really handy to have just on your cutting table. Never sit them on a cutting board though, because the heat will still go through and buckle. So, so that's my pieces on there. Now I'm just going to push all this aside so that I can pop it up on the bench here. I want to make sure all my chain, just pulled that ribbon through. That was very silly. There we go. All my overlocker chain and everything is actually hanging out. Try not to have anything caught up inside the seam as you stitch. And then we're going to place our lining piece with the right sides together on top of the whole lot. Okay, make sure you keep those the inside flaps folded in, and we're just going to sit this on top. And it is narrower, but that's okay because when we turn it all through, this hides in behind the flaps. I'm just going to pop a pin in here.
This is great sewing with you as well.
And I love projects that come together really easily and quick and just work. And that's why I love an overlocker, because they just work every time when you change your needles and change your blades and do all the right things, of course. So I've got a little bit of a technique I'm going to show you now, because obviously we want to stitch straight across these seams, both top and bottom. But you want to neaten that seam because this is the final seam that we're doing. So you can always use a hand needle and pull the thread back in underneath, but this is something I always teach in my Learning to Love Your Overlocker class. And it does save you time because for me, if I don't have to go back and do anything later, it works really well. Can you just zoom in on the foot keel? Sorry. I'm going to start to stitch. And I'm going to just do, say, 2 stitches onto the fabric. Then with the needles down, I'm going to raise the presser foot. And that chain that's coming out the back, I pull it out so it's really smooth. Then I'm going to swing it round in front of the needles and in front of the blade. Can you see that? And then I'm going to pop the foot back down and holding that chain in front of the blade. If I just keep stitching, that's securing that end to start with, and I don't have to go back and do anything later. So I'm just trimming a small amount as I go. If you like to really cut away at your fabric, you might need to cut it a little bit deeper to start off with to allow for that. Oh, And I didn't do the end step. I'll do that at the end. That one I'm going to have to hand finish. When I get to the end of the other one, I'll show you that one. Sorry, it was that exhale of like, oh, I'm nearly there. I'm nearly at the end. So again, a couple of stitches on, needles down, raising the presser foot and making the chain nice and smooth. Bring it around in front, pop the presser foot back down, and off we go. Keeping all those chains out, so we're trimming them with our blade as we go. This is why overlockers are so good, because you get such a neat stitch. Your blade does the trimming. It's a bit like the Thermomix in the machine world, isn't it? Okay, so when I get to the end, I'll show you how to finish at the end of the seam, so I don't have to go back and manually do it. So when you've got to the end, we're just going to go just past the edge of the fabric. So very slowly at this point, and I often hand wind those last couple because inevitably, if you're doing it with your foot, you're going to go past. With the needles up in the highest position, we're going to raise the presser foot and we're going to flip it upside down and pop it back in front of the needles. So you don't want to pull too much thread when you're doing this, because otherwise you're going to get big loopy threads. And when you're running it back underneath, you don't want to cut your work. So we want to be away a little bit from the blade. So that's where what I call the death line is great, because your fabric is sitting the other side of that. So you're not going to trim your blade. Trim it with the blade. So a couple of stitches over the top, and that's securing the end of that seam. Now, when you run off with an overlocker, you know you get that ugly bubble and it looks really messy. So a much neater way of finishing is having your needles in the highest position, raising the presser foot and pulling just a small amount of thread down at the needles. Then you can take your work away, pop the foot back down and chain out. So you can see how neat that end is. And I can then trim that off, and my end of my seam's nice and secure. And I'll have to go back and finish that, the other one. Okay, so now we just have to turn it through. You might go back up to the cutting table, to the iron for that. So we just pop our corners through. If you wanted to do any other embellishing, you can still do it, because you can actually get in underneath quite easily because the lining is loose, it's not sewn in. So if you do want to do any other embellishing work, I'll pull that through. I'll fix that other end later, or maybe not. No, I will fix it later. So we're going to tuck these in underneath, give it a nice press, and there is my notebook cover done.
Not that side.
Not that side? What do you mean?
It's the inside.
It's the inside. But I really like that fabric that I've put on the inside. It's very pretty. So this could become a new Overlocker Project book. You might make a list of all the things that you want to make on your overlocker. Or just a general sewing book. Or a Saturday notebook.
A Saturday's notebook.
For the Saturday live classes.
Yeah.
I'll give that a nice.
Mary Shepherd said my palette is a bit too thick, but I'm reasonably happy with first efforts.
So Mary's just said her palin's a little bit thick, but she's reasonably happy with what she's done, which is awesome. So you could also put, an interfacing into these pieces. If you've got a thicker palin here, maybe use interfacing here, depending on what you've got to work with, of course. So let's turn that around where I've got my ribbon there.
Beverly said, wow,
and
what is that?
There's my little cover. I didn't want to clean coals out of notebooks, and I probably don't need 100 notebooks. But that'll just slot into there. It's a firm fit, but you want it to be firm so it's not it's not moving around and slipping off, obviously. So I had an idea yesterday for anyone who makes this project in the next week. I'm going to pop a post up on my page, and I would love you to post a picture of your finished notebook cover. There we go. Not too shabby. So I would love you to post a picture of your finished one on the post that I put up about the competition. And next Saturday, I will draw, I'll put everyone's names in, obviously, that enters, and I'll draw one name out, and we will do a free Zoom class. So a 1 hour class, one-on-one with me for the first name I draw out. And then I'm going to give away 4 of my t-shirt patterns. So this is my More Than a Basic tee. I shouldn't wear black because it's just, covered in thread, not the feet. Don't get the feet. So More Than a Basic tee, you can do a basic t-shirt from it, long sleeve, short sleeve. This is the cow neck. There's also the wrap front, which is that one over there. I like them because for me, having a panel tends to hide some of the sins that we get as we get older. But it also means that it's just a nice garment that you could wear going out for dinner even. And it's all overlocking techniques, so roll hemming, gathering, and the construction all on the overlocker and the cover stitch machine. So look out for that post. So post your finished notebooks, and I hope you've really enjoyed this. I hope you've learnt something, and I'll hopefully see you soon. Is there any questions?
Amanda said love the tat.
So Amanda loves my tat. This tat actually, don't look at my feet are terrible. It actually has very special meaning, and a lot of you out there would know Nola Sterling, who is the most amazing mentor for me as well as a beautiful friend. So that's in memory of Nola. She loved dragonflies, so. And Keely paid for it for a Christmas present. So I had to point that out. So that's Nola was probably the most giving, loving person I've ever met. And that's my reminder every day to be a better person. So that's the meaning behind that for me. So.
Do you know Daryl Gidito?
Yes.
He said get the feet.
So any other questions so far? You can always send me a message if you're working through this and you've got any problems. Please PM me through my page. Would love to see what you create with this. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've had a bit of fun.
He said, had no block for 20 years plus and really don't use it to its full potential.
So, well, what I'm hoping with some of these projects and some of these ideas that I'm giving you is that you will get more use out of your overlockers. They are probably the most underutilized machines out there, and it amazes me every time I do classes that people have had an overlocker 20 years and maybe never rolled hemmed on it, and there's so much you can do on them. So I hope you all stay safe and well. Send me a message if you have any questions. Have a great Saturday. I'm going to go and pour a wine now because it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so take care.